You look at it constantly, it sends you things all of the time, and for many of us, it can be a complete lifeline to the outside world, but it can also be the most unproductive and worst thing that we can do for our mental health. Let's talk about simplifying screen time coming up next. Well, hello friends, I'm Mary Beth with At What Cost, where simple living and deep faith go hand in hand. And today I am joined by my friend Robin at Minimalist Home. You'll see her in just a little while. And today we're talking about that little thing that we always want to spend less time on, but just can't seem to do it. You guessed it, we're talking about our phones. Now, the best illustration I've seen about our relationship with those little screens that we carry around with us all day long is like having a slot machine in your pocket. You know, pull the lever, win a prize. And sometimes it's a like, sometimes it's a new picture, maybe it's a notification, maybe it's a delivery notification for like the fourth time that week. I know. I've been there myself. A text, an email, an advertisement, we get a whole lot of stuff through that little bitty thing all day long. And what's stressful about it is we get a whole lot of stuff through that little bitty thing all day long. It creates these micro interruptions all throughout our day that are constantly bidding for our attention. And we all know how one well-meaning moment of productivity can lead us down the rabbit trail of all kinds of crazy things that you can find on the internet. Not to mention what we know that social media can do to our mental health over time. So why do we give in to the constant checking of our phones or mobile devices throughout the day? And for most people, it is pretty constant, usually at least once every 15 minutes. And I know in most cases, especially if I'm at a doctor's office, waiting room, or something that I don't actually want to be participating in, it may be even more than once every 15 minutes. I know, you're probably doing it too. Now, we check our phones this frequently because of a little thing called muscle memory and his sneaky cousin dopamine. I don't know if they're actually cousins. It doesn't really matter how they're like really related. Our central nervous system is pretty awesome when you really think about it. It helps us to just do those things on autopilot that we can't otherwise devote the kind of brain power to. There's no way that we could remember to do all the functions. Like, I can't even remember to give my kids like 2 fruits or a vegetable. Like, we need this autopilot, friends. But the more our body becomes in the habit of doing something, the more we go on autopilot and just continue to do it. When we throw a little dopamine in there and get a hit off of that feel-good hormone, well, it can be the recipe for a really bad disaster. It doesn't have to be. Dopamine is a really good thing for our body. It helps us to feel that feel-good hormone. It helps us to connect with other people, and it has a really good function. But when it starts to be linked with a bad habit, it can take us down the wrong path. So how do we kick this habit? Now, you've likely heard of this idea of dopamine detoxing, and it's really popular right now. We hear it everywhere. Unfortunately, Medical News Today came out with an article that said there's really not a lot of scientific data to indicate that trying to detox yourself from any dopamine-producing activity, that it's not necessarily that helpful, and it's darn near impossible to do. And in some cases, it can actually lead us to just a different type of addictive behavior. So what's a girl to do? Well, it's not all bad news, friends. We can do kind of the basic things that we hear day in and day out. Turn off all the notifications. In some cases, you may even consider turning your screen to black and white. When it's not as visually appealing, we tend not to want to look at it that often. Take off any apps that you're not using. Maybe consider taking some of those apps off of your phone that you do use frequently, but don't actually contribute to your productivity. And of course, you can always turn on the do not disturb feature and limit your screen time. Any barrier that you can place between you and that gadget to slow your response to all of those notifications is really going to help you build a new habit around your phone. But that may not be enough because this muscle memory thing is strong. And if you're like me, eventually you figure out a way that you really need to have those things back on your phone, and you kind of reconcile to yourself that you'll just put it on there for a little while and then you won't look at it anymore. And eventually things are just back to normal again. What I have found to be the most helpful is to replace that screen time with something else. So on days when I really need to focus on a task, I put my phone in another room, turn off all the notifications, and when I get that urge to look at my phone, I do something a little bit more productive and something that feels good, like stretching, praying, going for a walk around the block, and one of my personal favorites, writing down a small thing in my calendar that was good about my day. It starts to replace that urge to look at our device with something that's a little bit more gratitude producing and positive. It can also be helpful to do a little self-reflection in those moments. When you get that urge to pick up your phone and mindlessly scroll through things, take stock of how you're feeling. Am I bored? Am I unhappy? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? What's really happening in these moments when I have the urge to open my phone? Once you understand how you're feeling and why you have this urge, you can find a better solution. So if it's because you're feeling lonely, maybe you need to go talk to like a real live person. I know it's been hard. We haven't done those things in a while, but it still exists. Or maybe go outside and look up at the sky and remember that you were created for more than just mindless scrolling. And there's actually some scientific evidence behind this, that when we adjust our eyes, when we lift up our eyes above the horizon, there is a sort of reset that happens in the behavior patterns of our brains. The same is true for looking at the ground. Sometimes in those feelings of overwhelm, if we will physically look at the ground underneath us, we feel more grounded. I know. Screen time can also take a toll on our relationships. I know just for my spouse and I, we can sometimes find ourselves in the same room watching TV, texting emojis back and forth to each other through a variety of different apps instead of actually having conversation. Be mindful of your interactions with people. A majority of our communication comes not just from verbal communication, but nonverbal. So when we're talking with our spouses or our children, they're picking up on our nonverbal communication, which may look a little like this. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. Doesn't seem very inviting now, does it? Robin, will you tell us a little bit about your experience with screen time?
Do you ever feel happy that you haven't looked at your phone for a while? I certainly do. Actually, I remember once being like, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at my phone for like 2 whole hours. I was so proud of myself, so I rewarded myself by checking Instagram up. Okay, that might not have been the best move. So my husband and I, we're kind of guilty. We look at the phones a lot. Now, I in particular am scrolling through social media and things like that, but I also am checking emails, adding to grocery lists. I'm doing a lot of things to do with my YouTube channel, to do with my business, to do with my work. But the problem is the kids don't realize that, and we're setting a bad example. So I have a couple of thoughts for what I could do to make this better. So I've considered keeping my phone in a safe place. Now, I've done this before. I've thought, okay, I'm also not going to keep it in a bedside, and I'm also going to just use an alarm clock instead of my phone to wake up. But I can't say that that has always worked. Now, I have found that I will put it in the drawer, and that helps me from the constant, sneaking and picking up the phone, the muscle memory that Mary Beth discussed. But I kind of find myself sneaking in and opening up the drawer and grabbing my phone. I could try turning off notifications. I do wear an Apple Watch. I could turn those off as well, which would be fine. I mean, I don't use a ton of notifications. I would say that the main notification I get is pretty much just text, and I don't want to miss any texts. But Mary Beth did discuss some of the things that we can do, but ultimately I think that for me, what I need to do is just remember that I have to be strong and remind myself that I need to resist certain things. Like I don't need to be checking YouTube all the time. I don't need to be checking Instagram all of the time. I can set certain times of the day that I need to do that on days when I need to do that. Or I need to just say, first of all, you're not doing that today. Really, I just need to be strong. The problem is, like Mary Beth discussed, we can feel really bored, and that's why we just pick it up. And I have to say, I'm actually kind of ashamed about the amount of times where I have been looking at my phone with friends around, family around, and most importantly with my kids and my husband, and I've just been looking at my phone while they're trying to talk to me. So here's one thing that I need to get into the habit of doing. Hold on 1 second. I just have to finish adding to my grocery list. I'll be right with you. But most importantly, I probably should do this. Oh, yeah, I'm listening. So I'm gonna try really hard to commit to actually putting my phone away for one whole day per week. I'm going to keep my trusty planner nearby just in case I need to add things to any list, because ultimately I feel like to me it's like the laziness of like what is the least amount of energy I can put out and still be entertained, and that is like checking my phone. Like I'm too lazy to even just read a book, which would interest me far more than the stuff that I see on my phone. So that is my plan with my screens, Mary Beth.
It is so good to know that I'm not the only one who can also fall down that kind of rabbit trail. And of course, we set the example when it comes to our kids, which means handling screen time is more important than ever. Robin has some great perspectives when it comes to handling screen time with our kids. So be sure to check out her video by clicking the link right up here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.